Good morning. I'm Brian Cirillo, president of Peerless Media and the publisher of Supply Chain Management Review, the producer of the NextGen Supply Chain Conference. First, I want to thank you for attending. We know that this has been an unusual year that has put unprecedented demands on everyone working in the supply chain. We appreciate the time you're spending with us, and we think we put together a stellar program that will make it worth your while. We launched this event in 2019 because even then, supply chains were becoming more complex than ever, especially when it came to technology. Our goal was to put together a program where senior-level practitioners could share what's happening in their supply chains to serve as a roadmap for others on the same journey. The disruptions brought about by COVID make that more important now than ever. But COVID is also opening up new opportunities for leading organizations to use their supply chain as a competitive weapon. It's also an opportunity for supply chain leaders to deliver more value to their companies. After all, the world is watching supply chains. The format may be a little different this year, and with luck, we'll be live again next year. But the mission remains the same: to provide senior-level supply chain professionals an exceptional conference where their peers discuss what's next in supply chain management. And with that, I'd like to introduce Bob Treblecock, the editorial director of Supply Chain Management Review. Bob has been the driving force behind the conference since our launch in 2019. Bob.
Thank you, Brian. And good morning, and thank you for coming. My name is Bob Treblecock. I am the editorial director of Supply Chain Management Review. And along with Brian, I'll be your co-host over the next 3 days. Now, Brian just gave you a preview of the conference, so I promise I'll keep my remarks short so we can get to the main event. Late last spring, I began getting calls from radio and TV stations who wanted to talk about the supply chain. Most of their questions began with, well, who broke the supply chain? Or more to the point, why can't I buy toilet paper? But what if supply chains weren't broken? What if they performed exactly as designed, but weren't designed for the circumstances that we were all confronted with? That's the premise of Welcome to the New Abnormal, a new book by Yossi Sheffi. The title seems apt. In it, Yossi argues that it's time for a new supply chain design. I would argue that the best supply chains and supply chain leaders are already on that journey. They're applying people and next-gen technologies to redesign their supply chains to meet this crazy, changing world. COVID didn't start the change, but it has accelerated the change. And here's the bright side and why I think the stories you'll hear from this year's presenters are so timely. Supply chain is in the spotlight. It's our time to shine. With innovation, we can make the most of it. Over the next 3 days, we'll deal with the what and the how of next-gen technologies that is important to senior leaders like you. Just what the heck are they, and how are some early adopters already using them to innovate in their supply chains? Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions about the platform and how to navigate the event, visit the information desk. Also, when you registered, you were automatically entered to play the leaderboard game. You earn points by participating in the conference. Be sure to visit the exhibit hall, chat with exhibitors, and submit questions to presenters. We have thousands of dollars worth of great prizes for the winners. And like the lottery, you can't win if you don't play. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors and give a special recognition to Honeywell Intelligrated, our diamond sponsor. During the breaks, please take the time to visit our exhibitors in the exhibit hall. They've made a real effort to get here and make this event possible. Now, to our first keynote speaker. One of the biggest investments any of us makes in our home are appliances like stoves, refrigerators, freezers, and washers and dryers. If you think distributing them is as easy as putting them on a truck and making a delivery, you'd be wrong. Today's consumers are looking for the same information and customer service levels when it comes to their appliances as they are for small parcels. GE Appliances is working hard to make those expectations a reality while also creating a lean and responsive supply chain. Technology is key. This morning, Mark Shirkness, Vice President of Distribution for GE Appliances, is going to describe the company's smart distribution network. So Mark, welcome, and let's get started.
Thank you, Bob. Pleasure to be with you this morning. And I'm excited to tell you a story of our story here from GE Appliances and the journey that we've been on for the past couple years. And I hope you'll enjoy it. I think you will. So I think to open a little bit about who we were and who we are. So I think everyone knows GE, been around forever. You know, appliances division has been around for over 100 years, but within the context of the General Electric Corporation, we were a very small piece of that $300 billion portfolio. And, very conservative company, as we know GE is. And quite frankly, I would show up to work in the old days playing not to lose versus playing to win. And it was just kind of the way GE ran its business. And as we know, in the late 2000s, GE started to divest some of its businesses. And of course, appliances was one of the first businesses to be divested. And in 2016, Haier, which is China-based, purchased us. And for us, it was very liberating. I mean, my God, here it's the largest appliance company in the world that has come in. They needed a footprint in North America. We were a perfect complementary fit for them. And so, it's kind of a very nice transition for us at GE Appliances to go from kind of this little itty bitty piece of the puzzle in the GE Corporation to now being a part of the #1 appliance manufacturer in the world. And my God, you think about it's like Christmas morning where the world of opportunity is open for you with a ribbon on it. So a little bit about Haier. As I mentioned, #1 in the world. Vast across the globe. Over 100 countries. GE Appliances. We've been of course one of the mainstays of the appliance industry over many decades, and we're currently over half of all homes in America. So just a beautiful complementary fit with the acquisition. A little bit about the footprint. As I mentioned, we were purchased specifically to fit a North American void that Haier had. And so here's our, kind of our U.S. Operations. We also do have manufacturing facilities in Mexico and Asia as well. But this kind of gives you an idea of the scale of the company. And so each year, as a consumer product company, we are about scale, velocity, speed as most, driving economies of scale. And so this slide kind of puts in context, that relative nature of what we do. And you see, we deliver an appliance every 4.5 seconds to either to a home or to a job site. And a lot of that's driven from we do have the largest final mile delivery network in the appliance industry. So tremendous scale in our operations. As I mentioned, a consumer product company with a lot of velocity. So a little bit about the journey that we were on for, how did we get to smart distribution and what was really the underpinnings to it. And it started with the question from Haier when they purchased us. They said, look, we're #1 around the globe. We want to be #1 in North America. We trailed Whirlpool by quite large margin, back in 2015, 2016. And so they asked us, us not part of the supply chain world distribution, what's it going to take to become #1? So, clearly I don't have to preach to this group at all about, the importance of Omni and being able to serve all customers, the way they want to be served. But this piece around the growth became a very interesting Rubik's Cube for us because, in order for us to become number one, it essentially said that we had to double in size. And then how do you double in size without doubling your warehouses, doubling your people, double your assets? How do you create that synergy and that leverage to get to your end state and do it with a strong return on investment? And then the third piece of that is we do have in our portfolio some very nice assets, some what we call the leading capabilities that we want to use as kind of the base or the foundation upon which everything that we do. And I'll show a little bit of that in a moment. So, you start your journey. You got to figure out how to meet these strategic goals. Like, how am I going to become number one, double in size, and get and be able to lean into this whole omni-channel and all the different things and challenges and the complexities that represent. And so you start off looking in the industry, who's doing things great. And, in our world in distribution, as we know, it tends to go through these very, distinct phases. And I think the latest phase that we've been through that was really kind of ushered in by Amazon, this whole frictionless and the ability to move goods and services through a distribution channel with just looking from the outside in, like one-click relative ease. We know there's a whole lot of complexity and challenge behind that, but we were asking ourselves: is this where we want to be, or do we want to go somewhere one step beyond that? And that's really the question that we set out to answer in determining the strategy that we were going to do, is asking the question, what's next? And as we think about our world today, and it is so great to be in supply chain and distribution these days. It's like 10 years ago, say at a cocktail party, no one would want to talk to me because no one really cared about the, supply chains and distribution. Now with robotics and drones and robots and blockchains, and thanks to, the kind of the omnification of our world, it's become very topical. And with that has come this just blizzard of different things that you can do to help, build, pattern out the way you want to approach your future. And this really became the trick in, our test of trying to figure out if we are going to try and go to a new place, take that transformative step, how do we leverage these pieces and put the pieces of the puzzle together that are going to work best for us? And that's where this kind of the concept of SMART came together is, back to being asset and return on investment efficient. It's like, let's not do for the sake of doing, but trying to figure out how to do and do it smart. I mean, time and time again, we just kept coming back to say, let's do this smartly. And that's how we coined our phrase SMART. And it was really built upon, just the acronym of SMART and how we go about and went about. And this is how we go about everything that we want to do and accomplish. What's the framework or the model by which we screen and test everything through? And so I'll do it by example. So, in our world, say in one of our warehouses, our operators use Basiloid equipment, which is one of the more challenging, tricky pieces of equipment that you could ride in a warehouse. And it could take up to 6 months for an operator to become really proficient on that type of equipment. So we would ask a question, why is it 6 months? Why does something have to take 6 months? Why can't it be 3 months to mastery? So that's where we kind of get into this notion that complexity, or the opposite, simplicity, drives efficiency. And so we're always looking for how do we do things in half the time, or how do we save 5 or 10, 15 minutes of an individual's time? And that's the first screen by which everything that we do passes through. So in this case, we wanted to reduce operator time to proficiency, cut it in half. So then how do you go about accomplishing that task? Well, with the operator, it's predominantly equipment based. So we know we need to do some innovation around equipment and some around process. And then as you see on the slide, how do you incubate trial and error, figure out how to scale it to get your payback, and then do you really think you could have a transformative project with it? So that's our world is smart. And I wanted to do this as the backdrop. So as you see each one of the programs or projects that are presented here, you know they kind of flow through this screen in a methodical way. I also mentioned that we wanted to leverage our what I call our portfolio of assets. We've done some very kind of interesting, cool things over the years at GE Appliances within our industry. I think it was 15, probably 17 years ago, we were one of the very first businesses on the Apple App Store offering an app. We, back in 1999, actually had received our first patent. And back then, we didn't know it was an e-commerce platform, but essentially it was patenting some processes around dropship vendor capabilities. And through that, we've also leveraged up the largest delivery and installation network. And I'll talk a little bit about being fast and flexible here in a moment, which really is our hallmark and our differentiator in the industry. So a strong core foundation, as I call it, of assets upon which we always want to lever everything upon. And so this is our backbone, probably similar to many companies in consumer products, making sure your footprint covers 90% of the US in a day or less. And then what we do is we augment that backbone with, as I mentioned, one of the largest final mile delivery networks in the industry. So here's her journey of SMART. For what I wanted to share are the components of SMART here around intelligent building design, innovative equipment, and integrative systems. And I'll tell a little bit about the new buildings, the new warehouses that we're constructing to fit within our world of SMART. And our SMART warehouses, if you were on Google Earth looking down, one of the things that you would notice about our warehouses is that there is more concrete poured outside the building than inside the building by intentional design. So we want massive yards surrounding a building and tons of doors everywhere. And the reason for this is that we had a paradigm shift in thinking that forced us to create different warehouses. So the old paradigm is we used to basically instruct our operations, unload it as fast as you can. Of course you want to unload everything as fast as you can because you want to get an inventory so you can sell it as fast as you can. And so this whole notion of speed, get it off a truck, get it in inventory so it could be available for sale. And the paradigm shift that we had was really what you want to do is that's a lot of wasted motion, time, and effort. What you want to do is wait until you don't want to touch something, unload something, especially something as big and bulky as an appliance, until the very last moment when you know you have an order. It's because then if I know that I have an order that I can take it off of one vehicle, cross stock, and put it on another vehicle, I am dramatically improving my efficiency. And this is where we kind of get into these buildings become a mashup of a transit facility, cross stock, and a regional distribution center all in one. So this notion of the paradigm shift of saying speed doesn't necessarily, be the end all to be all, that we actually pause all of our trucks in our yards and wait for hopefully the right moment to unload so that we could get a nice marriage or interleave to an outbound. So our new paradigm is there's more activity in the yard than in the building. And if there's more activity in the building than in the yard, it means you've tilted in the wrong direction. So now we'll talk a little bit about the innovative equipment that we brought into these new facilities. And this is where we kind of had the most fun, because this is where you get the spirit of invention, and you get, everyone in the organization involved in coming up with creative ideas and bringing them to life. And it's incredibly, exciting and liberating, as we know. And so the first piece, I mentioned up front, we have the Basiloid is a very challenging piece of equipment. And so, when you think about the time to mastery, 6 months to master, how do you get it to three months or less? And the thing that kind of struck us was the lack of technology that was available, to kind of outfit this style of equipment. And you think about the automobile. I think about when I learned to drive back in, the dark ages, so to speak, compared to when I taught my sons how to drive. When you have auto brake assist and, and lane notifications and rear view cameras and, your automobile, it just goes on and on and on all the way up to parallel parking for you. And, we get into these discussions of making our equipment easier to use. And that's what we kept coming back to, was make our equipment like the automobile of today. And what that involved was putting assisted, cameras on it to assist in picking, doing things with variable speed drive that limits torque and pressure, laser guided direction, like you would have like when you back up in your car, and outfitting this piece of equipment with a lot of sensors, so that the sensors can assist the operator in knowing when they're doing things correctly or incorrectly. And so we went about, kind of souping up our rides here, so to speak, got a couple patents along the way, and just a really, really cool project. And I'll touch on it one more time here in a bit. In addition to that, to round out that portfolio, more of the equipment, of course, we're to use some of the Laron clamps, and I love the VR trainer. We're with RBC's, our partner on this one. And they have completely, when you're in our trainers, you're in our warehouses. They've completely replicated it. It's a wonderful way to screen new applicants, in addition to just training operators to come up to proficiency faster. And then we do things like the lithium and the robo wrappers. And we do things like this. They're great productivity projects in and of themselves. But what we really like about doing projects like lithium and robo wrapping is the operators in the facilities love it. They love not being able to have to get off their equipment all the time, either to change a battery or to wrap something. And what it does, what we do projects like this, is it trains your workforce to be very open to change and innovation. And they embrace it, because we give them these, like, I call them the yum-yums. You give them a few yum-yums of technology. It makes them feel good about change and innovation, so that when the bigger changes come in, it's more seamless. We're working on a couple other things. We're testing drone cycle counting right now and tinkering with some AGVs. And we're also working on a pallet bander where the operator doesn't have to get off a vehicle. Again, on one of these great yum-yums that you could actually ban something without having to touch a pallet or a bander. So a lot of cool stuff on the innovative equipment side, and now I'll shift over to some of the integrated systems. And that begins with the digital thread. So I talked about our velocity warehouses and we want to bring things into the yard but not touch them until we have to. So that means that we need to have that perfect marriage of knowing the information of when a certain product is arriving, going out and scanning through millions of lines of order data to find that perfect marriage. It says, oh yeah, a certain builder or a certain consumer needs this appliance. When you unload it, just go ahead and take it to door 32, because it's going to leave tonight or tomorrow. And so this digital thread, kind of brings that whole concept of the velocity warehouse to life. And this was the aha moment for us. So if you look at an industry, we think about, okay, in our world, okay, I want to unload a truck and I want to do it efficiently. And I know there's a lot of conveyance and, like robots that could unload vehicles for us. And then we say, okay, I want to make the put away process more efficient. And you could get an AGV to put your product away and store it. And then, of course, you have auto retrieval systems. And, and so you have all these different technologies and innovations around making the existing system more efficient. And our aha moment was, kind of getting back to this transformative step was don't automate the existing system. Just do a completely different system, which says we don't believe in the concept of put away. Now, naturally, we do put things away. I mean, I'm not going to over, dramatize it, but to the point of setting a culture and how you run it, your operation, the notion that we don't believe in put away is radically different and to kind of transform everything that we're doing. And it's because we today have these incredibly powerful tools like a digital thread, and we partner with a company called Tessa to help us with that. We do genealogy tracking systems. I think in the opening, Bob said, this thing about, you want to know everything about your appliance, like everything about your parcel or, your Amazon shipment. We have breadcrumbs everywhere. We have, it's kind of like be careful what you wish for. It's like, yeah, we want to be able to show the world everything going on with an appliance. And the next thing you know, we're managing billions of lines of data. But what's really cool about this is that once you establish your data lake, and we have these billions of lines of data in there, we're now wrapping AI and advanced analytics around that data lake. And so now we're getting to the point where we can actually predict, like under certain time and conditions or circumstances, like where an appliance is most apt or likely to get damaged, and then be able to take corrective actions to prevent it. So some really kind of cool, starting to get on the leading edge there. And then we wrap it all in a control tower. A control tower is a couple years old. TrackX, FourKites, kind of same one in the same these days. FourKites OTM, TMS system kind of wraps us all together. And then here's one of the innovations that, again, gets back to when you get people thinking and you create the culture of innovation and wanting to release great ideas from everywhere, and you're willing to look everywhere in the world for solutions, sometimes you just come across stuff that just knocks your socks off. And this is one of them. And so we partnered with actually locally here in Louisville. That's how we're familiar with it. And it was an individual that was at the University of Louisville working on some stuff, and we kind of, crisscrossing through some circumstances here on what he was working on and what we were looking at, started to come up with this concept. And essentially, this is what we're working on is off of its standard printer. So just like the printer that you have by your desk, that you could print a little tag or a little label. And that little label can interact with your Wi-Fi and be detected with a reader. So you think, we all know the limitations of RFID, whether it's passive or active. This completely blows it all away. And so you can imagine a world where I put a little tag on every appliance that I have, put it in my warehouse, turn on the Wi-Fi, turn on the reader, and I'm reading every appliance in my warehouse, and doing it for the cost of printing a sheet of paper off of a printer. So just doing, again, kind of this notion of the spirit of innovation, how you just never know where it can lead you, and how excited we've been on our journey with, and being able to come across projects like this. So that's our world, how it comes together with the intelligent buildings, the innovative equipment, in the integrated systems. It's been an incredibly powerful system for us in our architecture. And as I mentioned, it couldn't be possible without our partners. As I mentioned, innovation comes from scanning the world, diversity of ideas and having the courage to do things in these companies that we partner with, or our partners for so many years. I am so appreciative, because without them, really this presentation was not possible. And we're starting to see great results. What I love about what we've done is it made us look really smart looking backwards, because now that we're in the age of COVID and we're seeing all these disruptions, like right now we're seeing the massive inventory build after the shutdown, and the inbound is out of balance with the outbound, and the flexibility and the dexterity and just the sheer power of our system. We're just going through this COVID episode, which is tremendous confidence. And that's the number one word that I love about the team and what we're able to do in a smart distribution architecture is every day we are confident we can do what we need to do to win in the marketplace. So with that, I'll show you how it all comes together with a short video. Oops, if you will.
This washer is 1 in a million. Actually, it's 1 in several million, made at GE Appliances. The person waiting for our appliance wants it now, as soon as it's ordered. Within hours of being built, this 180-pound washer must travel 950 miles damage-free and be on time. It's no small feat. Not to worry, when it comes to distribution, GE Appliances leads. Leveraging the best of technology, we make it easy for retail customers, builders, and consumers to know when their shipment is coming and receive it with lightning speed. We call it GEA Smart Distribution. We'll see how it works through one washer's journey home. Every appliance has someone who needs it. But what about our washer? Where's it going? That's where. A digital thread connects each GE appliance with its destination. Smart. We move appliances with the help of these Basiloid lift trucks. But with mechanical controls, traditional Basiloids are hard to operate. So we designed a solution. Introducing the Smart Basiloid. GE Appliances' exclusive technology, inspired by the automotive and IT industries, launches appliance handling into the 21st century. Variable speed settings and navigation lights help the driver move through a warehouse with ease. With its advanced features, the Smart Basiloid captures data to solve problems before they happen. Our washer is safe and sound and ready for a road trip. It's more than a solo journey. We keep a close eye to make sure it gets there. The Track and Trace team knows our washer's every move through satellite and cloud-based GPS tracking technology. Welcome to a distribution center that moves appliances like no other. We're making warehousing more like a superhighway than a traffic jam. With GEA Smart Warehousing. This warehouse, with its large smart yard and hundreds of doors, is designed to reduce product handling by 50%. A quick scan reveals who needs our washer. As soon as it arrives, it's shipped out again. It has to get there, well, now. The washer arrives at our local delivery agent, where we give the builder who ordered it the confidence and visibility that it will arrive on time. Looking good. Our award-winning delivery and installation are the ultimate white glove experience. It's good to be home. Our washer's story is one of many. At GE Appliances, we believe there's always a better way. That's why we're pioneering the future of distribution to get appliances home now for our customers, builders, and families. GEA Smart Distribution, leading a new era of now.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed the video. And Bob, I believe that we had a few minutes here for Q&A?
We do. Thanks, Mark. And thanks for that presentation. We have about 10 minutes, and I've got some questions, and we also have some questions from some of the attendees. You know, I took down 2 notes while you were talking that I'm going to take away with me. One is be careful what you wish for. I just think that's good advice all the time. The other, I'm going to think of it as Shirkness's law, sort of the opposite of Moore's law of, you know, how many things we put on a chip, which is the divide by halves as sort of a guiding principle behind these projects. And that had really struck with me. So a couple of questions from me, and I'll bring in a couple of questions from attendees. First, I just wondered, this wasn't part of your presentation, but we all went through COVID. There were lots of shortages, there were disruptions. I know that appliances, I don't know about GE, but appliances in some areas were, you know, in short supply. I wondered 2 things. One, what did you experience at GE Appliances? And then 2, how did the foundation that you've already put in place with a smart warehouse enable you to get through it, if that's pertinent?
Yeah, it's a good question. So kind of the COVID, call it phases, the phases of COVID. So early spring or late spring, we go into shutdown mode. You know, so manufacturing facilities, you know, suppliers, everything goes cold and dark, and essentially naturally dries up the supply chain. And so then now we're living in a world that I call it the void or the pocket. So, you know, we're kind of, you know, everything kind of slows to that grinding halt. You know, we're still shipping out appliances a lot because, you know, America living at home just went gangbusters on wanting to redo their kitchens, fortunately. But with that very strong consumer pull going out, you could see obviously our warehouses that did have product in them began to deplete very quickly. And in turn, we were waiting for the void to be filled, and certainly it did. And when our manufacturing and, you know, the industry's manufacturing capability came back up, it came up plus a whole bunch to, you know, play the game of catch up, plus also play the game of, wow, this is like the greatest time of appliance sales ever. So, you know, all of a sudden now you're producing mammoth amounts of appliances and trying to push them through the supply chain. So where you know, our world kind of came together on this was a lot of it around visibility and transparency. To start with, you know, if in the call it the old days, and that's what I love about the world that we're in. I'm talking like the old days, they're like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. We would have absolutely been crushed because we wouldn't be able to plan down to incredible levels of granularity and detail every day, every hour's activity. And so in today, you know, we have 2x the number of inbound shipments coming in from factories than we had, say, this time last year. But we're able to manage it through transparency and visibility because of the digital transformation that we made. So here we are in a short order of, you know, 3-some years that we did something. Like I said, you know, it's always good to kind of look smart after the fact. But if we hadn't done these things, we would have, our own supply chain would have overrun us. And then on the flip side, with the way we've designed everything, because the inbound and the outbound now are completely out of synchronization, you need a lot of dexterity and flexibility, obviously, in being able to manage that type of seesawing. And with the way we design the buildings and with the current processes in place, we're able to do that toggling without tilting the system. So that's kind of how, you know, working through our COVID, moments here, what I call the COVID phases, we've been able to navigate it successfully.
Great, thanks. I have a question from an attendee on the shift, you know, to a cross-dock facility. I think there's some a little bit of information that you can share quickly that might set that up. You have these very large facilities, they're 1.5 million square feet. When you see a picture of them, they look chock full of inventory. But most of that inventory is not reserve storage, right? That's inventory that's not going to stay in the warehouse for very long. What's the sort of the outlie period of time that something sits there that isn't your evergreen products, you know, things that are moving through?
Yeah, so I'll just say we are in the double-digit terms, spectrum. So that gives you a feel that you may see a lot of boxes, but those boxes, kind of come and go relatively quickly. When you saw the picture of our warehouse, I would say this is what I want you, if you could peek inside it and get a good bird's eye view of it. We like to have try and keep it to about half the building being storage, and the other half of the building, essentially a quarter and a quarter on each wing, being the active pick and ship areas. So, again, when you're dealing in millions and millions and millions of appliances that you ship each year, you look at one picture and go, well, yeah, look at all those boxes. But when you're turning those, in double-digit fashion, and when you're thinking about them, as a warehouse, you really only want inventory in about the warehouse to have half of it with the inventory and the other half active movement space.
So the question thank you for that. The question from the attendee that kind of goes to that is, could you elaborate more on that shift to a cross-dock facility with, trucks as kind of the rolling storage right before they move into the DC? How did you make that shift? Did it impact packing and loading and things like that? How did you do all of that?
Yeah, the big shift is the digital thread, because ultimately what you have to do is you have to mortgage your inventory that's on vehicles, and not just so essentially you don't only sell what's in your warehouse, you sell what's in your trucks or your intermodal containers, etc. And so that ability of the digital thread to be able to look out onto inbound shipments and sell it is the game changer. And that's the power of the digital thread is being able to anticipate and get out in front and get ahead of everything. And then once you know that, you churn and burn. You make it a cross-dock facility.
Thanks. Another question from an attendee. You did a lot of innovation in there. I remember the Pascal tags really struck me. How much of the innovation in your supply chain is ground up versus top down?
I would say about 80% of it is ground up. And the 20% that's top down is really the things that are kind of out there in the industry that we want to do. So take like robo wrappers and the other things like that are out there. We just kind of come in from the top down and do that. But take like how we outfitted the lift equipment, and that came from the operator saying, I need this, like in the Q&A, you're looking at the vehicle and image in the background. I need you to give me laser lines. I need the vehicle to act in a certain way. So that it's that interaction with the operators who know best, obviously, telling us what they need is what drives the innovation versus me thinking what I need to do to make that thing easier to drive or operate.
One last question. You talked a little bit about the data lake and how now that you have the data lake, you're starting to use AI in some of your processes. And AI is one of those confounding technologies that people wonder, well, where do I start? How do I determine where AI can deliver value for me? So at GE Appliances, how did you do that? How did you decide this is the spot?
Yeah, and this is be careful what you wish for again. Exactly where it is, because it is it's paralyzing. Like, where do I start? What do I do? And that really is where we started. Is we know that one of the biggest challenges that we have is shipping something that's thousands of pounds and it's glass and metal, and it damages easy. So we wanted to zero in our efforts around, let's start with something which is what can we glean out of a data lake that is going to help us get better on just damage, like maybe where it occurs, who's doing it, under what circumstances is it happening. So like, for example, you may have the hypothesis that, you know, at the end of the day, when our delivery teams are tired, they tend to damage more product. Well, we could go into the data lake and prove and disprove that literally in minutes. And so that is, you know, to this whole world of advanced analytics and being able to have, you know, AI and, you know, pushing information at you is, man, we just took a small sliver of that pie and we want to take it one bite at a time, or else we just paralyze ourselves.
Good.
So
Thank
it's
you.
a long journey and an iterative process.
Right. Thank you, Mark. Great presentation. Thrilled to have you as our keynote. And we hope to hear from you again soon. We're now going to bring up.
Pleasure.
Yeah, we're now going to bring up our next presenter. We ended the conversation with Mark talking about innovation, and it's a great segue for our next presentation. You know, innovation is a business buzzword today. After all, who in their right mind wants to be viewed as just treading water, right? We all want to be on the innovation train. And at some companies, like GE Appliances and Kenco Logistics, innovation is more than a buzzword, it's a way of doing business. As the Vice President of Innovation and Research and Development at Kenco, Christy Montgomery, our next presenter, is knee-deep in the 3PL's innovation projects. She's going to share with us what it takes to innovate in your supply chain. Christy, welcome.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys today. So I titled my presentation Death, NASA, and Digital, and maybe I should have put COVID-19 in there as well to say, are you ready? But really what I want to kind of talk to you guys today about is how do we look at innovation differently in the supply chain in today's world, and how do we get started with it? I think that's where most people just get frustrated. Where do I just start? And Mark did a great job of kind of just telling us how they started on their journey. So for those of you who don't know, Kenco Logistics is the largest woman-owned third-party logistics organization in North America. We have about 90 plus distribution, transportation, material handling facilities around North America, and we employ about 5,000 employees. And I will agree with Mark wholeheartedly that innovation is ground up, and that's how we do it with our employees as well. So I wanted to twist Darwin's words just a little bit here and say that supply chain evolution in today's world is about the survival of the innovative. Forbes recently put an article out that said that 65% of the supply chain industry leaders believe we're experiencing tectonic shifts in this industry. And they also in that same article said that 10 years from now, 50% of the S&P 500 is going to be replaced. Think about that. 50% of the companies that we know as the strongest companies out there are going to be gone in 10 years. And you don't want to be one of those. So what's driving this innovation? It's the labor market, it's the resiliency, it's sustainability, it's regulations, compliance, the geopolitical environment that we're in, the fact that there is faster, cheaper compute power available now in the industry, and this digital first concept. How do we implement digital first? So here's what we're going to talk about today. 4 things. Supply chain management is dead. I believe that Bob opened our conference last year with this. We're going to talk about the shift a little bit. We're going to talk about this rise of the machines and what that's doing to make us smarter and better at our jobs. We're going to talk about digital transformation a little bit, and then we're going to talk about the final frontier. And then I'm going to kind of clue you in on one of the greatest keys, I think, to success and innovation in this industry. So we got a lot to go through. Hang on. Here we go. So last year, Forbes put an article out, and this is what they said. In 5 to 10 years, supply chain management as a career is going to be obsolete, replaced by digital, self-regulating utilities with very little human intervention. I don't know about you, but as a lifelong career supply chain person, that's a little concerning. So what are we going to do about that? And I would ask you, do you believe that? I think what I do believe is there is a huge shift happening in our industry. The move from focusing on managing people and things to managing data and information. And what do we do with that? And it's requiring new skill sets that we haven't had before. You heard Mark talk about data analytics, huge new skill set that we need to be asking our leaders to have in a supply chain world today. The move to predictive, prescriptive type functionality versus being reactive to everything that's happening to me. I need to be proactive and be prescriptive. And building new processes around the information versus around how the human works. So what does that look like? We're seeing a rise of the machines, from robotics to drones to blockchain to autonomous vehicles, you name it. We're seeing this influx of customers, from our perspective, asking for more and more and more automation. How do we become more autonomous, right? How do we become more intelligent? How do we use these machines to augment our people and our smart people to make them even smarter and our processes even smarter? So I would say this is what we're trying to move to, a smart, connected supply chain, not just inside the four walls of the warehouse, not just inside the trailer of the truck, but end to end, being able to understand my supply chain holistically. So why are we making this move? Why do we care at this point in time? From my perspective and where I innovate from, it's all about the customer. So it's a better experience for that customer, whether they want it faster, they want it cheaper, they want it more reliable. Ultimately, they also want visibility and transparency from me in an innovative world today. So why do you think that is? I think in today's COVID-19 world, we're seeing the consumer become more and more savvy and want what they want it now, and they want it customized to them. And so how do we make that happen in a world of traditional supply chain? That's where our smartness comes in. Everything is moving to a digital world. And the question for you is, how are you responding as a supply chain manager? How are you becoming more digital? The Forbes magazine article that came out earlier this year made this statement: the digital supply chain is the concept of the year. And I think that was coming long before COVID came along. So you see a lot of terms around this. You see the word digitization, you see the word digitalization, and you see digital transformation. What are those terms? What do they mean? And where are you along that journey? So digitization is the first piece of digitally transforming your organization. It's really about taking your information, your communication, your storage, and putting all of that in a digital format. Digitalization is now shifting your processes from being very manual, paper-oriented, and old school, if you want to say it that way, to a digital business model. In other words, making digital the first priority within your organization. You just heard Mark talk about that. So then digital transformation is the combination of those two: digitization, taking your data and storing it in a digital format, and digitalization, making your processes digital first. And I think the statistic I saw last week was about 85% of all manufacturers and retailers are in the process somewhere of digital transformation, which begs the question, how are we responding as supply chain managers? We have to be on that journey as well. And I think resiliency drives this need for this digitalization of our supply chain and digital transformation. But here's the interesting thing. It's not just about the technology. Does everybody out there know who this guy is? This is Henry Ford. And Henry Ford created an automobile, a thing, right? But last year in a TED Talk, I heard this information and I was blown away. And I wanted to give it to you guys so you can understand what's happening. So Ford is going down a parallel path of still making things, making automobiles, but they now have this concept of perhaps we're not going to make any more sedans because people are not buying those as much. And we're going to take that money that we're putting into that stream of revenue, and we are going to become a data digital company, and we're going to sell that information. So we're going to move from physical manufacturing to becoming a technology company, a data focused company. We're going to have the concept of living streets where our automobiles are collecting information about the infrastructure and the urban areas of the country. And we are going to create a transportation operating system that is now going to feed municipalities, urban areas, cities, information about what's going on their streets and the infrastructure that they need. And they're going to start selling that. So guess what? Now they have a whole new revenue stream that is driven from the digital transformation of their organization. So my question to you would be, how can you take your data and change it into almost a revenue stream for your organization? How do we in the supply chain move from that manual into the digital age? So this, I am not the author of this. I'll give all credit to PwC. They created this graphic, but it really does tell the story of what is happening within supply chain. As we're moving from this traditional one-to-one, very sequential flow of information and data into a much more circular, open sharing network of the data that's around your supply chain, and becoming a much more collaborative ecosystem and making it much more autonomous as well. So this is what's happening when we talk about connected. This is what we mean. Data now becomes a value chain for you, instead of it just being something that you have to deal with every day on a daily basis. And how do you move to that? So let's talk a little bit about the DNA of digital. Mark said this in his presentation, and I love the fact that he answered this question. Data, as you start gathering all of this, can become incredibly overwhelming. What is it? Where is it? Where is it coming from? Is it clean? Does it make sense? It becomes almost paralyzing. And you move into analysis paralysis. Which of this data is important? What am I supposed to be looking at? What am I going to do with this data? How does it correlate with this data, right? So I would say to you, as you take a step on this journey, look at it from the perspective of, what insights do I need to make the best decisions right now for my business? What is the biggest problem I'm trying to solve? And how does this data give me the insight to enable me to solve that problem? At the end of the day, that's why you want to be digital. That's why you want to move to digital transformation. It's all about solving the big, hairy problems that we haven't been able to solve until today with some of the technology that exists out there. But again, the heart of it is your customer and your customer's experience. And how do you enhance that by using the data that you're gathering? And what do you do with it at that point to drive a better customer experience? So my last kind of topic here that I put in my title was NASA. NASA has issued a call for supply chain leaders to tell them how to colonize the moon by 2028. I don't know if you guys saw this article last year in Supply Chain 24/7. So they're asking us to tell them how to do better packaging, how to move products that are heavy in a better way, how to reduce the footprint, how to automate the storage and retrieval of those things in space. And you say, Christy, you know what? That's really cool, but so what? Well, here's the so what. This new and emerging technology that's out there becomes mainstream. We have to start looking at how do we give our customers remote customization capabilities around our products. Can they 3D print something that makes that very custom to them? How do we have smart packaging, like Mark talked about, that we can track information? How do we track and trace at the end points all along the space, right? How do we vision, voice enable our supply chain? Lots of technologies that are coming that are going to quickly become mainstream. as our government entities start pushing this out. So let's talk about the application of this as I kind of wrap up here. I think that one of the things that makes us most successful in innovation is collaboration. This will be your key to success. Ford got 350 of their strategic suppliers together and started sharing best practices across their supply chain. How do we do things the most efficient way? And they shared with each other. And that becomes interesting in today's world with the competitive market, right? How do you share in a way that you keep your competitive advantage, but you're collaborating around innovation? McDonald's and Cargill put in a system that's all about the customer first. How do we improve the customer experience? And let's come together with a long-term vision of all of us winning in this journey to deliver a better customer experience. It's somewhat the foundation of Kate Batasik's vested model as you look at supply chain. There's this myth out there, and I'm not going to go through every one of these really cool guys, but that innovation happens in a vacuum and there's a lone innovator. Edison did not create the light bulb. Hate to tell you guys that. Electric lighting already existed. The incandescent bulb already existed. What he did was create a more efficient, better medium to deliver light and made it widely accessible. And suddenly he got credit for inventing the light bulb. It was a collaboration, guys. I tell you what, Steve Jobs, his first iteration of iTunes was a partnership between Apple, Motorola, and AT&T. Could not have happened with those other two entities. It was a collaboration. So how do we overcome those hurdles? This is where you're going to have to collaborate. You're going to have to bring your suppliers to the table and say, listen, we want this to be a win for you, but it's got to be a win for me too. So how do we make that happen and serve our customers better and be more efficient and be more productive and deliver better service and better value to our organization? It's all about a winning mentality. And look outside your own ecosystem. Maybe there's something that's happening in a whole other industry that you can bring into supply chain that would be beneficial. So here are what the key concepts we talked about. I know it's been quick, but there are tectonic shifts happening in the supply chain industry today. Everything is moving to digital first. Shift happens, folks, but collaboration is the key to innovation. Collaboration with your employees, collaboration with your suppliers, collaboration maybe sometimes with your competitors. How do you make the industry better? How do you make your customers' experience better? And finally, I'll say innovation is not optional, and it's not about ideas, it's about execution. It's delivering on that innovation. So here's one of my favorite sayings: it is what it is. But I always add on to that. It is what it is, but it will become what we make of it. The future is ours to build. Does anybody have questions?
Thank you, Christy. First, and I want to thank you for reminding me that I'm about to become obsolete. I did begin our last conference with supply chain management is dead, and I have been fitted for a blue greeter vest, so I'm covered. The second, you had that SpaceX slide up there, and I can report, I'm sorry, the NASA slide up there. NASA has actually awarded its first contract for a cargo rocket to SpaceX. So they're in the process of developing a supply chain, and it's a really long last mile, but a last mile delivery system for the moon. So anyway, I have a couple of questions here. One of the things you hit on right at the end was how important collaboration is to this. I've seen presentations both by you and some of your Kenco colleagues, and I know that you have, your innovation center. Internally, what are the skill sets you're looking for to put together an innovation team, in your innovation lab? Because it's got to be a little bit different from putting together, the transportation team or the order fulfillment team.
It is. That's a great question, Bob. So I've been in the industry for 30 years. So I'll say that one of the skills needed is just industry understanding, and then being able to truly look at problems differently and think about how do we serve our customers better. I work inside a team of 40 plus engineers I'm not an engineer. I'm a technology person, and so I drive them crazy a little bit. But I enjoy being creative and saying, what if, what if, what if? Never accept the status quo, I would say. And that's difficult in today's world. But having folks who can look beyond and think about, what does it look like 3 years from now? What does it look like 10 years from now? And what does my customer really need? So one of the key, I will say, one of the key skill sets is just building relationships and getting with our customers and truly collaborating on how to solve their big problems.
Another thing I wondered, we are going through this transition period, and there are people, you just mentioned that you've been in the industry 30 years, but you're on the innovation team. Lots of managers who've been around, supply chain for 30 years have done things one way. Now there's a whole sort of new skill sets going to be required. Have you found that transition for senior executives who have been around challenging, and if so, how do you overcome that when you're developing these new solutions?
It can be challenging for both our floor associates and for our management team, but I think for us, really the key when we bring an innovation to the table is really including them in the entire process. Having them help develop the solution, how to make their job better. At the end of the day, showing them the benefits. What's in it for me? It's the same thing that we all look for. What's in it for me? How do I help them see how this is so much better for them in the long term? We had a recent innovation that we worked on with a customer in one of our Canadian operations, and we had, it's a very digital first thing, and we had employees that said, you know what, when this thing goes live, I'm quitting, I'm done, I'm out of here. And we brought them into the whole process of designing how this digital solution would work. And when we were done and we implemented it, they're the biggest champions they are. They're like, tell me how I can go to other sites and help roll this out with you. They were so on board with it. I think it's bringing people along as part of the process, communicating. That is so important. Managing that change with having their input as part of the process along the way, I think is critical.
I've got a couple of questions about the customer experience, which you mentioned, numerous times as driving that. First, in your industry, is innovation customer driven? In other words, when you're getting RFPs, are your customers basically saying, how are you going to innovate for me? Is it coming from them or is it coming from you, or both?
I think it's coming from both. We certainly are getting RFPs. In fact, I presented to a potential customer yesterday that said, what we're looking for is innovation. Tell us how you do that. And we explained how we do that. But also, there's that component of I'm out there seeking, talking to our customers. What are your problems? How do I help you solve those? What can we work on together and deliver something new to the industry? So I think it goes both ways.
The other part with the customer experience, as your starting point, do you start with the process? Or do you start with the technology? It's sort of the chicken and the egg sort of question.
It is the chicken or the egg. I typically try to start with the process, just because if you're starting with the technology, sometimes you've got this really cool gadget that you're determined to put into somewhere just because you really like the technology, and it's really not a fit. So I typically try to start with the problem or the process and say, okay, what's out there that could potentially solve this, or what can we create that could potentially solve this? And really starting with the problem at the heart of what we're trying to tackle, or the challenge. Maybe it's not a problem, maybe it's something that's happening that's good and people want to tackle a better way to do it.
Then related to that, there are a lot of cool gadgets out there. Are you also, just in terms of trying to figure out how these things might fit in your operations, are you piloting interesting technologies just to understand how they work, even if you don't have a home for them right then?
We are all the time piloting things. So we have a dedicated innovation space where we bring new technologies. I'm very involved in the logistics startup community. And so just looking at some of these brand new technologies, helping these startups kind of craft their solution so that it better fits our industry, because a lot of times the startups are really smart and they know robotics, or they know mobility, or they know IoT, but they have really no concept of logistics. And so helping them craft their product and trying it out and getting it to that point where it becomes a valid solution that we can even pilot with our customers. We don't try to take something into a customer facility until we're confident that it will work in their production environment.
Great. I think one last question from an attendee. This might even apply to Kenco, but the attendee noticed that car manufacturers like Ford have gone from selling cars to selling data, right? The data they're collecting from the cars, selling services around that data. Are you aware of other companies doing that? For instance, is Kenco doing that? And how do you make that transition?
So I think the Ford model is a really good one to refer back to, because they're not abandoning their current line of business, that they're continuing to manufacture cars and manufacture great cars, right? But they're having a parallel line. So yes, Kenco launched our advanced analytics initiative earlier this year. It's called DaVinci AI. So if you're familiar with DaVinci, you understand the concept there. But certainly we are developing advanced analytic models based on the data that we're collecting for our customers, and doing some strong projects around things like labor planning and dynamic slotting, and just things that will help us drive better efficiencies into the warehouse. So that is something we're doing, but certainly the core of our business is distribution, transportation, material handling, real estate. So we still are there, but that consulting piece of our business is an area that we're putting some focus on for sure.
Great. Thank you, Christy. That's all the time we have. Great presentation, and I really appreciate your participating in the event. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. So that's the end of our first block. I want to thank Mark and Christy for their presentations. We're going to take a break that will allow everyone to get a little work done and to visit our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to take an in-depth look at the state of supply chain software. Now, you're not going to miss that. Brian?
We'd like to thank the sponsors of the NextGen Supply Chain Conference, particularly our Diamond level sponsor, Honeywell Intelligrated, our Platinum sponsor, the Association for Supply Chain Management, and our Gold sponsor, Elemica. We'd also like to ask our attendees to take a walk through our exhibit hall before the next session. All the exhibitors have a representative ready